This message has no affiliation with the Department of War. All right, good evening, everyone. Stick with us today as I interview Nick Aurora, a Gen Z conservative involved heavily in Turning Point USA. Today, we will discuss ICE, abortion, the economy, the Second Amendment, and so much more. So stick around for an episode that you will not want to miss. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo. All right, Nick. Well, first of all, I'm glad we finally got this set up. I know it took a week or two, but I'm happy to have you on the show today.
Glad to be here.
So first of all, we've talked a little bit about you, and I know just from what I've seen that you've posted, who you are and the things that you like and are driven to. But for the audience that does not know who you are, would you like to talk to them a little bit on who the wonderful Nick is?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Hey there, Patriots. My name is Nick Aurora. I am a Gen Z conservative activist. I am the events coordinator for my college's Turning Point USA chapter. I really like to view myself not only as a conservative activist, but also as a fighter, in a way, to the name of Jesus Christ, which, as a matter of fact, I have the best book in existence right here. It is the Holy Bible. And I would just like to say that's a very good Bible. Yeah, about me, I really got into politics in 2018. I mean, I come from a family, we immigrated from Brazil legally in 2017. I really wasn't involved all that much until in 2018, Bolsonaro got elected in Brazil. And then I saw that Bolsonaro supported Trump, which back in the day I didn't really like him, but without a reason because we had such an unfair and biased media in Brazil. I decided to really take my own time to research President Trump's platform, and I began really agreeing with him more and more. His stance on foreign affairs, his stance on law and order, most specifically, but most importantly, his stance on economics. I've always tried to be a more of a free market leaning guy. As you can see, I have a flag right here. Don't tread on me. But yeah, I am a very I am, excuse me. I love my God, I love my country, and I love everything the conservative movement stands for. And I think that it is my vocation to fight for it and to prevent this country from falling into the evil hands of socialism.
Well, Nick, that was very well articulated. And yes, that was just a perfect answer. I don't think anyone else has given such a great answer. I do want to dive into something that you said, and you are a first generation immigrant.
Yes, sir.
You've seen it firsthand. And why is it vital for the integrity of the nation that we prioritize the front door of legal entry and treat the back door, which we would consider a legal entry, as a hardline violation? Why do we need to have that?
That is a very good question, and it all boils down to essential, not really even politics, but morality, which is the fundaments of a nation. What is a nation? A nation is not just a state that exists. That is a flawed idea that has been repeated many times in society and has led to many conflicts in the past. For example, the idea of Yugoslavia. You take a bunch of people who have zero join culture whatsoever, unite them into one state, and they rebel. You can see that in the Soviet Union. You can also see that in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. All of these fell. But really, the core fundament of the answer comes down to what is a nation. A nation is a collective of individuals who share a common culture, common values, a common historical background, and a common language. And what really makes our nation, the United States of America, so great is the rule of law. In the United States, we believe that there is an objectively moral code dictated through us by God's revelation through Jesus Christ and in the Old Testament. And thus, everybody who wants to join this nation and become a part of it, as Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, must sign a social contract and abide to the laws of our country, as Romans chapter 13 also preaches through Paul's articulation of being subjected to governmental authorities. Now, legal immigration is important because not only because it establishes the sense that this nation means something, and in order to enter this nation, you must be able to really demonstrate a specific value to our country and the willingness to work hard and build your own future. But it is also very fair because think about it. Legal immigration is not easy. My parents and I, we spent 2 years in the line to get into this country. Lots of money, lots of time, lots of sacrifices. Nothing is more unfair to us than watching somebody cross over the border,
Yeah.
completely dodge the entire legal path which we fought to keep, and then get thousands of dollars in benefits which we never did. It all comes down to preserving our identity as a nation, but most importantly, preserving the fairness of the law, which the left so claims to want to defend. Yet, of course, as usual, they don't.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. And I do want to touch into that as well as ICE, because currently ICE is often characterized by the left as human rights violators, the worst of the worst, scum, in the wonderful words of Tim Walz, Gestapo. How do you frame their mission as a fundamental necessity for national sovereignty and public safety?
Well, that's a very easy answer. Illegal immigrants are here, as the name says, illegally. The
Mhm.
penalty for illegal immigration is deportation, and ICE is carrying out deportations. It doesn't get really simpler than that. Of course, the Democrats can try to manipulate and say that we're abusing human rights. Yet I never saw any of them crying and whining and complaining when Laken Riley was killed, when
Yeah.
around 12 teenage girls were murdered viciously by these illegal immigrants. I never saw any of their complaints. As a matter of fact, President Biden not only refused to say Laken Riley's name in the State of the Union speech when then Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene urged him to say her name, Laken Riley, he said it wrong. Instead, he said Lincoln Riley. And I didn't see any Democrat complain about that. I didn't see any Democrat complain about the sniping incident shortly after Charlie Kirk was murdered, where a radical left lunatic grabbed the sniper, also engraving very leftist messages in the bullets. Thankfully, I believe no ICE agent was murdered, but it was still an attempted murder. I don't see any leftists actually complaining about that. So when we talk about human rights violations, nothing is more in violation of human rights than supporting an organization which is the far left Antifa warriors who want to declare ICE as a synonym for the Gestapo, which we all know how evil that is. But
Yeah.
most importantly, they want to demonize hardworking American law enforcement agents who want to get rid of criminals, of rapists, of gangbangers, the worst kind of people in this country. I mean, do the victims of these murderers get human rights?
Yeah. I don't know, Nick. I sometimes feel like we're very lost as a society. And when you have these people, Hakeem Jeffries, another one, telling people to fight back, when you have these politicians and these elected leaders going in front of the camera and in front of the mic, shouting all these terrible things, like you said, dehumanizing our ICE agents and our federal law enforcement, that's going to spark people like Renee Good. I don't blame, by the way, I've said this before and I will say it again. I do not blame Renee Good for what happened. I blame the politicians, the elected leaders over her just shouting absolute crap, and that's why she took action. And it's very sad to see how fragmented our society has become over this issue that they didn't really care about when Obama was putting millions in cages. But that's a story for a different time. I do want to ask one more question on this note, though. How do you respond to local officials who claim they are being compassionate by refusing to cooperate with federal immigration agents? And what is the cost of that compassion to legal residents? I'll give Gavin Newsom as a good example for that.
Well, I don't really think it is compassionate to fight against an organization that once again is trying to remove criminals from this country and restore economic and social balance into our nation. I don't think there's anything compassionate about that. I believe it is compassionate to get rid of the people who break the law and instead preserve fairness in the United States Constitution. That is compassionate. The implications go from higher crime and higher economic issues. But most importantly, before I touch on that, I just want to add something, which is this very flawed idea that the Democrats have, which unfortunately it is this propagandist view that anything that ICE does is maleficent and anything the rioters do is compassionate. I
Yeah.
mean, if we look about it, and I don't want to accuse them of anything, this is precisely the same type of propaganda used by terrorist groups like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like Al Qaeda all over the world, which is that we are going to propagandize and brainwash our citizens to view one specific set of society as the enemy. We're going to incite them to commit violence. And
Right.
when the other group, in this case ICE, fights back, we're just going to use the deaths of these misguided and brainwashed people as
Mm.
propaganda to push our political narrative. I
Right.
mean, this is narcissism at its finest. But now back to what you asked regarding the implications of illegal immigration. It is not of a doubt to anybody that illegal immigration is detrimental to our society. Let's look at economics. I mean, leftists always like to say, "Oh, illegal immigration raises our GDP, and illegal immigrants pay billions of dollars in taxes." Well, they don't really understand economics then, because the majority of the GDP increase seen through illegal immigration is basically the wages that these illegal immigrants get paid, which, by the way, are low and contribute to actually lowering wages for American workers. Because when you think about it, what determines the price of labor in a capitalist market is not only the demand for a product and the supply of a product, but also the quality and the market value for a position. So when you have illegals competing in the same position as Americans, and since the illegals are, as the name says, illegal and therefore not bound by the same protections as American citizens, employers can afford paying them less.
Yeah.
So what does that say to these Americans who are more qualified yet still competing for the same position? They're also going to be paid less because that's how labor market works. That's how market economics works. So that hurts American workers. But when we talk about the economic effect in general, when it comes to spending, I believe there was an immigration study done in 2024 or 2023 by the House of Representatives. Actually, no, it was the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, I believe it was. I forgot the name of the organization, but they discovered that each illegal immigrant contributes to a $68,000 net deficit in our economy every year. That does not look like something that is beneficial to our people. And
No.
when we talk and that study actually includes the billions of dollars of taxes paid by illegals every year in tax revenue. However, the amount of benefits, as a matter of fact, illegal households are twice more likely to be receiving SNAP and welfare programs in each state than regular American households. Medicaid around the same. Oh, but illegals don't get Medicaid. Yes, they do in specific states because the
Yeah.
power to run healthcare is belongs to individual states. That's
Yeah.
the 10th Amendment.
Yeah.
And California had the Medi-Cal, which actually covered illegal immigrants. So yeah, it is expensive, it hurts American workers, and it raises crime. Great example of that. President Trump declared an emergency on day one, lowered encounters by 97%, a 6-month streak of not allowing a single illegal immigrant to enter our country. And what was the effect in 2025? Violent crime dropped by 30% or
Yeah.
20% in the
100%.
lowest levels since over 50 years.
Yeah. Unreal. It's amazing how much illegal immigration is, as much as people try to make it a singular issue, how it extends beyond that and it ties into crime, it ties into the economy, it ties everywhere. And in that spirit of the economy, I do want to talk to you about liberty versus socialism in America here. So,
Sure.
you have built a life in America, you and your family. How do you argue that free market capitalism is the only system that truly honors the dignity of the immigrant's hard work, whereas socialism creates a cycle of dependency?
That is a very easy answer, and that answer all about boils down, as I said before, to individual choice. I, Nick, am different from you, Zachary.
Yeah.
Um, us Americans are different from Chinese. That is what really constitutes humanity. We're all different with individual personalities, with individual likings, but most importantly, with individual necessities. The
Right.
problem with socialism is that instead of treating the United States of America as a country composed of individual Americans, it treats to create this flawed view that we're all one people with the exact same issues. That
Right.
doesn't happen. The problem of socialism always boils down to this idea that human beings are equal when they're not. The
Yeah.
good thing about capitalism is that unlike any other system, it actually preserves um, the fact that human beings have unique challenges, have unique issues, and have unique wishes for their family. But most importantly, it allows them to choose. When you look at capitalism, a company that does not perform as well as another, it's going to go bankrupt
Yeah.
because a company that is more attractive, that provides a better service, and that really produces the products that people want is going to succeed because the revenue of a company, the profit of a company is entirely dependent in a capitalist society on how much their clientele wants and how much they're willing to purchase it. Under socialism, not only are there price controls that really inhibit people's ability to determine their demand for a specific product, but also there is no incentive to produce. If you look at Venezuela under Hugo Chavez and then Nicolás Maduro, the price controls destroyed the Venezuelan economy. Most importantly, oil. There was no incentive to really construct the oil industry, especially when we take corruption into account. So even before the oil crisis in 2014, Venezuela had already started going down. In 2012, when the price of oil was still rocket sky high. That happens because there is no incentive to build the economy. There is no willing of the government to actually work for the well-being of their citizens. But most importantly, there is no way to regulate the supply and demand for products. It's all price controls, it's all collectivism. And then one day, the people who don't want to work will not work because they're going to keep receiving all these benefits from the government. And the people who were working, being enslaved, and paying 50% of their income in taxes are going to want to join the bottom percentile. And guess what? Nobody will produce anything anymore.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because now we live in a handout culture where everyone wants a handout. We are seeing increasingly staggering numbers of individuals choosing to basically live off the government instead of getting out there and doing hard work for a living. So we see a push for universal basic income and a massive welfare expansion. Why is a government funded safety net actually a velvet cage for the American worker? Why does it not work?
Well, that actually is a complicated answer, but I'll try to make it simple. The first problem is that socialism, as I like to say, it's like a drug.
Yeah.
When you look at socialism, it sounds so attractive. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest, who doesn't want free healthcare? Who doesn't
Right.
want free schools? Who doesn't want free meals? Who doesn't want free money? So the problem lies that when somebody, instead of trying to push harder, to work harder, but most importantly, to reap an environment where hard work was going to lead to individual prosperation, they instead rely on government benefits for help. They
Right.
become entirely dependent on such program. And
Yeah.
that is not only the first part of socialism. The problem of that is that um, as you go through and through with time, there are so many people, even today, there are millions of people reliant on Medicaid coverage, on SNAP, on Social Security. The problem is, at one point, there will be so many people reliant on a government program that it will become unsustainable for the American government, in this case, to actually continue paying for it. For example, Social Security is the highest spent program in the United States federal budget.
Yep.
It is unsustainable. And if we don't do anything about it, we're going to end up like Canada, who cannot afford their pensions programs. But the problem is there are so many people reliant on this program that any politician who even dare say we must reform Social Security and cut spending, the other side of the aisle, who has enslaved these people for decades, is going to say they want to take away your benefits.
Hmm.
And this person who wants to reform the system will lose, and our spending will continue going up. That is the first problem. Number two, the big problem of that is that it is not really solving anything. And this is the biggest problem that I find with the Obama administration, who has embodied this sort of Keynesian economics that if I take money from somebody else and I give it to another person, it's going to magically multiply into 4 times over into a pot of gold. That doesn't happen. The problem is that they don't consider the fact that when you're taking money from somebody, the same person who you're stealing money from could be using that money to make jobs, to buy things for their family. And when you start taxing these people more, they're not going to be as enthusiastic about spending their money. And as a matter of fact, they're going to save it. And that was the problem that we saw under the Obama administration. So we talked about healthcare. Obama's main program to really fix the healthcare crisis was Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act,
Yep.
where he said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. We're going to cut spending by 50% with
Right.
families. We're going to reform healthcare. Did that happen?
Yeah.
No.
Not at
Premium,
all.
yeah, premium healthcare prices, premium insurance costs doubled from the time that Obamacare really went into effect to now. Um, Out-of-pocket healthcare expenditure actually went up under Obama, and millions of Americans actually had to leave the doctor they preferred behind because of the individual mandate, which thank God was abolished by President Trump, that
Right.
forced people to pay for a program that did not actually need, which, by the way, is unconstitutional. And the Obama administration managed to get away by saying, oh, it's a tax. It's not a tax, it's a fine.
Yeah.
But lastly, when we talk about healthcare, these people don't realize when they say we got to fight the corporations, we got to fight the insurance corporations. Who were the biggest benefiters of Obamacare? Who we have just discovered last year saw their profits in the stock market raised by 1,000%. It were insurance companies. So how ironic, the people who say they want to fight for the American people and fight insurance companies ended up being the Robin Hood for insurance company CEOs.
No kidding. I do want to add on that note because people keep screaming healthcare for all, right? And I will say that there's two great examples that I can personally attest to on why that is just atrocious. And the closest thing we had to it in America was the Affordable Care Act, the Unaffordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And we had seen how much of a disaster that was and how they basically had to subsidize it to be able to afford it, and premiums and costs, they all went through the roof. So that's one of the versions. And also, as I am in the military, we have our free health care because every American soldier and their family, at least immediate family, like wife and kids, they get free health care, right? Well, when you go into the ER, I've been to the ER a couple times, unfortunately, and I'm waiting there 2, 3, 4 hours at a time because all these people are there because they're taking advantage of this socialized healthcare per se. So if you want any more examples of why that does not universal healthcare would not work in America, look no further. And then you could also look at Canada, how they're waiting forever and a day to get an appointment because they have socialized healthcare there. The list goes on and on. It is not sustainable, and especially here in America, it is not sustainable. So
Fully
I do
agree.
want to move on though, because we don't have too much time here. But I want to talk about America as a Christian nation. When you describe America as a Christian nation, how do you explain that our natural rights of life, liberty, and prosperity are derived from God and not from the government?
Very easy. I don't really see the Middle East respecting natural rights. I don't
Mhm.
really see the African countries respecting natural rights. I don't really see Iran or China or North Korea respecting natural rights. So if natural rights came from the government, then how come the places with more government overreach tend to be the worst at enforcing natural rights? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So when we
Yeah.
talk, let's talk about America as a Christian nation. A lot of people like to point out that America is not a Christian nation because, oh, we have freedom of religion and the Establishment Clause. These people completely misunderstand what the
Yeah.
Establishment Clause even is. And I actually want to like talk. There's one man who actually really helped me understand this. His name is Isaiah LaFell, Isaiah, thank you very much.
Love
Um,
Isaiah. That's
yeah, I
my
love
brother.
Isaiah. He's amazing. When we talk about America as a Christian nation, we got to understand not only the United States Constitution, but we also got to understand the fundaments of the United States Constitution.
Yep.
And the basis for the Bill of Rights, many of them include the freedom to religion, are based on the English Bill of Rights. And what is the sole basis for the English Bill of Rights? The Anglican doctrine of the then English Empire, the Anglican doctrine, the Anglican Church, a Protestant denomination of Christianity. And
Yeah.
even so, I was actually looking at this earlier today. Well, if you look at the writings of John Adams,
Yep.
John Adams said, and I quote, this Constitution only works for a moral and religious people.
Yep.
And around over 90% of the founding fathers at the time were actually Christian, Bible-believing Christians. Some
Yep.
of them were deists like Thomas Jefferson, but still believed in a higher power, which would
Right.
be God. So America is a Christian nation, and because historically, not only we have had the fundaments of an Anglican country, that really gave us the roots for our Bill of Rights. You can also even look at the history. I mean, the Puritans, they were Congregationalists who founded the Establishment Clause not as a we don't have any religion in America, is this completely secular place. No, the Establishment Clause was their way to prevent the rise of the Anglican Church, which was their main objection. They wanted freedom from denomination, not freedom from religion. And lastly, I just want to add something. This idea that rights derive from the government and not from God is morally and logically contradictory, because if rights derive from the government, then what is the point of debating if a government is acting immorally or not? They
Right.
can dictate rights. The only way we can have a truly objectively moral society where something is always right and always wrong is if we base our conclusion of morality on a higher power that transcends all logic, all morality, and all nature.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I've made this point on my podcast before, and everything you said as far as church, the separation of church and state is spot on. But one thing is, if we give the rights to the government, then the government can take those rights away, or they can misconstrue them and do whatever with them. But if we give them to God, that is eternal. And I feel like a lot of Americans and really Western society as a whole has forgotten that. So it's very important that we do have these conversations on that very issue. I do want to move a little more into this faith spectrum. And how has the removal of faith from the public square contributed to social and mental health crises that we see all across America?
Very good question. The first thing that has to be said is that the best thing about Christianity is that it really provides a purpose to life. I mean, God created us in his image with
Amen.
specific goals, but most importantly, he loves us and he wants us to dwell better in his house in heaven. And the problem with removing God from the public square is that you remove entirely the purpose of life for many people. A lot of these people don't really see any reason to do anything that would be entirely hard, other than, of course, maximize their own personal pleasure, which I believe it was Epicurus who argued that, completely wrong. And not only that, when you remove God from the public square, it becomes very, very easy to justify immoral actions.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. Ever since we started pushing this separation of church and state nonsense, our government has tried to justify abortion.
Mm.
They have completely trampled on the sanctity of marriage.
Yeah.
At this point, it's even a debate on what a man is and what a woman is. However, if we had God as the center for all of these truths, as the Bible said, there would be no debate. As
Yeah.
there is no debate in many of these churches, as there is such a problem for the liberal churches in actually describing what they truly want, because there is a Gen Z that is truly Christian and truly conservative who is rising and using scripture to debunk their misconstrued points. So yeah,
Yeah.
in conclusion, when you remove God from the public square, it becomes insanely easy not only to manipulate society, um, due to their lack of a centralized moral goal psychologically, it also becomes extremely easy to justify immoral actions, which later can lead to a takeover of power, which, by the way, was exactly the strategy so many dictatorial regimes, such as Nazi Germany, such as the Soviet Union, such as Cuba, such as any of these regimes, such as China and North Korea, used.
I'm glad something that we're doing as Gen Zs, we're bringing faith back into everything. And that's how it should be. Because for too long, unfortunately, well, not personally me, but our moms and fathers, the millennial generation and kind of the late end of the boomers as well, they've forgotten how important and sacred that religion is. And I'm glad that it's making a comeback and it's starting with our generation. I believe Gen Z, as much as people were freaking out about Gen Z at first because Gen Z was headed down the wrong path, I think we've really come to terms and we're going to make a more Christian conservative nation than we've ever seen before. So I do want to move on to the Second Amendment today because that is something that you wanted to talk
Great.
about. And I think it's very important that we discuss this because we face risks to the Second Amendment every single day. Conservatives view the Second Amendment as like our original insurance policy for all the rights. Why is the right to bear arms an individual right that cannot be compromised by the actions of criminals?
Very, very good question. First of all, fundamentally, I believe it was a German sociologist Max Weber who said this in 1920. The state has a legitimate monopoly on violence. That is really the standard fundament of the state to have a monopoly on violence in order to enforce the law.
Yeah.
However, as Christians, we also know that states, even the United States, are not infallible. They're not
Yeah.
perfect, and they can and will abuse power
Yeah.
whenever they're given too much of it. A great example of that can be seen with the Biden administration following the response to Hurricane Helene when
Yeah.
they rejected help to many people with Trump flags, or we can see that when they legalized abortion and gay marriage, and yada, yada, yada. Now, what the founders saw was that even though the state should enforce the law, that the state was also imperfect. And following the context of the time, which is that the founders had just won their independence through war, they saw it as essential so that the American people had the ability and the right to defend themselves.
Mm.
So they established that the American people, I will paraphrase this from the Constitution, that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yep.
And
Mm.
this does not only apply to protecting ourselves against government tyranny, which the left likes to pretend that it doesn't exist, but then on the other side of the coin, they like to call Trump a fascist. So I don't really understand their logic here. But besides violent rebellion against a tyrannical government, let's also talk about self-defense.
Mm.
Guns are essential to keep criminals away from the rest of society, the hardworking society. As a matter of fact, there was a CDC study done, I believe it was in 2023, that found out that the defensive use of guns reaches at around 1.7 million, I believe. And a Gary Kleck study in the 1990s by FSU found that defensive gun uses can even reach 2.5 million each year. Now,
Wow.
let's compare that to the number of murders using firearms every year, which is of 17,000.
Right.
It is a 1984 election landslide to the side of self-defense.
Yeah.
In a better football term, it would be Super Bowl 59
Yeah.
to the side of self-defense.
Yeah.
So the left wants to take away guns. Why? Not because they want to protect people, which, by the way, was exactly the argument used by Mussolini in 1936 when he
Mhm.
passed the public safety law, which enacted one of the strictest gun control laws in Europe, and Hugo Chavez when he seized guns in Venezuela. The left wants to do what the left does, which is control people. A disarmed society is unable to rebel against tyranny.
Mm.
But as God said, not God, but as Benjamin Franklin said, um, rebellion against tyranny is obedience to God. So our country is founded on the ideals of individual freedom. And in order to keep our individual freedoms and our natural rights of life and liberty and property, we must have the sole right to defend ourselves with firearms because guess what? Whether we like it or not, guns will always exist. Criminals, by definition, will always break the law, and the government, by definition, will always use violence.
Yeah. Something that my mom had brought up when I was a young age, and you know how some businesses will have this is a gun-free zone and like a picture of a gun with the red cross out. She was like, that's just an advertisement saying, hey, we don't have any guns. Come in here. We're not going to stop you. And that's a very real thing. I think if you take away people's guns and people's rights with the guns, then that's exactly what you're going to have. Hey, the good common people of just pick a state that they got their guns stripped away. We can go in there and they're not going to be able to do anything. So I think it's very imperative that we do keep the Second Amendment. I do have one more question on the Second Amendment for
Sure,
you.
Sure.
Do you believe that there's any limit or stipulations? Do you think all guns should be legalized? Do you think there should be certain systems or certain guns that should not be out there?
Good question. That may be a little bit tad controversial, but I am a Second Amendment absolutist.
Okay.
Why? Because my fundament for my belief in the Second Amendment is defense against government tyranny. It is
Yeah.
the idea that the people have to be able to rebel against the government. Well, we can't really rebel against a tyrannical government, a dictatorial regime, if the government will prevent us from having the same scale of weapons that they have. Now, of course, there is one situation that I can think of off the top of my head that I don't think guns should be, and not really in a way regulated, which is you
Yes.
should not be able to use a gun when being arrested by a police officer.
Yeah.
Especially what we saw yesterday with ICE. You should not be able to get a gun while you're being lawfully arrested.
Right.
When we have a country with the rule of law and who has not abused power in any way, you cannot get a gun and try to shoot at the officer because
Right.
that then you're committing murder.
Right.
And I just want to point something out. This is incredibly once again another contradiction of the left. They have trampled on the Second Amendment for decades, hated us, called us lunatics with guns, but then when one of their people gets killed for trying to pull a gun, which by the way was tragic, against a police officer, then they're all like, "Oh, he had a gun. It was legal to have a gun." Since when do they care about it being illegal to have a gun? They've been trying to take guns for decades. I
Yep.
mean, Minnesota has strong gun control laws. And by the way, what you said was exactly right about gun-free zones. The United States Concealed Carry Association ran a study and they found that 90% of all mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. And a good example I can give you, Brown University in Rhode Island, that is a gun-free zone. Didn't see a lot of outrage from the left on that one.
No.
Didn't see them talk about gun control. Why? Because it is only beneficial for them when it is against the Republicans.
Right.
When something happens that is contrary to their manipulation propaganda, they're going to be as silent as a Patriots fan in Super Bowl 52
I love these Super Bowl references, but I think there's a good, and
NFL
I'm going to
season.
paraphrase it. I'm not sure the quite verbiage on what it is, but all for me and none for thee. I think that's their same philosophy with a lot of things, but
Well,
especially on this issue. So um, I
sanctity.
do want to go ahead and move on here to the sanctity of life. That it is the pro-life movement that I was so blessed to go to this past weekend. Met some amazing individuals, did some wonderful interviews, which will be posted at some point here in the near future. But I do want to get your thoughts on the abortion or the pro-life, pro-choice movements. So it is the purpose of government to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can a government justify the legal termination of a life before it's born? I don't think they can. Do you?
Well, that really ties up to what we said earlier in this interview, which is the government can only justify such an immoral taking of life if they are the ones defining morality. But that
Right.
is not true because God is the sole provider of moral values. So no, in this instance, there is no particular way that any of these abortions can be justified because abortion is the violent termination of a life in the womb, an individual life with its own DNA, its own homeostasis, its own nature, its own image in God's eyes, and it is murder legally because it is the unjustified taking of an of a human life, innocent human life. So no, it is completely unjustifiable. Abortion is murder, and I think that a lot of these leftists who don't think so, they really need to look at the reactions that most mothers have when they have a miscarriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, something that was a frightening statistic that I'm sure you've seen, it came out a few weeks ago, probably even earlier than that, but 73 million abortions happened last year worldwide. And then they say about 1.5 million here in the US. How does that make you feel? Because to me, when I heard that, I was absolutely mortified, I would say would be the correct term. It's just unfathomable that that is happening in our world.
Yeah, it is completely disgusting. It is mass murder at its finest, as Charlie Kirk said. It is a genocide. And I'll complement your statistic with maybe an even worse one that
Yeah.
around one-third of Gen Z has been aborted.
Oh,
Um,
man.
just look at it. Like me, you, and Isaiah, statistically, me, you, and Isaiah were all Gen Z. I would be dead, statistically speaking.
Yeah.
That is how many people have been killed by the silent massacre of babies known as abortion. And the worst part is, I watched a movie called Nefarious, very good movie. I really recommend anybody watching this to actually have it, get it, actually watch it. And it says that the devil, we've done such a, I'm paraphrasing, we've done such a good job at mainstreaming evil in society that people look at evil and they don't even care. Yes, that is exactly right. Society has become desensitized to
Yeah.
evil, where we look at a baby being dismembered and murdered violently in the womb and just pretend like, oh, that's normal. And 73 million of them, with over 1 million of these babies being murdered every year in the United States of America. We cannot be the land of the free and the home of the brave if we deny people the biggest right of them all, which is the freedom from being murdered by deranged individuals who believe that anybody who is not worthy enough of being alive to them should be terminated, which, by the way, was exactly what a little mustache man in 1930s Germany thought of a specific group of people.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that last point up there because Margaret Sanger, the founder of abortion, the founder of Planned Parenthood, I shouldn't say founder of abortion, but maybe modern day abortion, she was a very close ally to the top officials of Hitler's regime. She was very connected with those individuals and she purposely put Planned Parenthood centers when they were first coming to fruition. She purposely put them in low income areas because she wanted to wipe out all the minorities and at the time Italian immigrants because she did not like them. She thought that they were terrible. She hated children. And another fun fact on that very note, Margaret Sanger was actually the founder of Girl Scouts, which I bet you did not know. But that's a frightening little fact, if you will, on who this lady is and what she all has done. And again, it's very sad to see that we still don't have any answers. And post Roe v. Wade, it's almost gotten worse. So I really do believe that Generation Z can end abortion, and the more and more people are finding out about all these side effects and all the health risks that are associated with abortion, I think they're finally opening their eyes. I don't know what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe that Margaret Sanger, especially what you said, she was the reason her reasoning for mainstreaming abortion was because of an insanely lunatical, I don't know if that's even a word, insanely crazed plan to cleanse society, as she said in a
Yeah,
quote. I don't know the exact quote, but paraphrasing, she said she wanted to clean society.
yeah,
And if you look at the major plan, that actually makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
I mean, what does the left do? And this isn't even only talking about abortions. It's mostly directed to their eradication of the family. I mean, ever since the early 20th century, they have implemented policies meant to break apart the black family. As a matter of fact, the divorce rates today are sky
yeah,
high.
yeah,
There a majority of black kids today, there was a study done, are raised in a household that does not have both parents,
yeah,
and when you look at something like that, it becomes easier to not see a baby as a gift from God, but as a nuisance that will prevent me from getting my college degree or a job. So I believe that the plan goes way above just abortions because the destruction of society as we know it starts with the destruction of the family. Aristotle said that the family is the bedrock of society, and it is in no way a coincidence that the number of abortions, especially in the black community, began rising as soon as the left destroyed the black family.
yeah. And the left destroyed it when Lyndon B. Johnson was president in 1960. I just had to look this up to make sure I hit it right. And that was the Great Society and Man in the House rules that really added to this unfortunate huge spike in divorce rates among low income and especially black families. So the left, the Lyndon B. Johnson, are the true reason that we have just unsustainable rules and an unsustainable family dynamic. They definitely added to this. So I do want to go ahead and move on to our last segment here, and that is what I call the lighthearted section. So we're gonna ask a couple just more fun questions and take it
Sure.
easy after we just had some great conversations and debates on some issues. So I do want to go ahead and ask you a couple questions here if you're all right with that.
Of course, go ahead.
Absolutely. So here we go. My first fun question is if you had a superpower, what superpower would you have and why?
That's a very good question. That's actually a very, very good question. I would probably choose something. I would probably choose like the highest IQ in the world. Why? Because I do not want something that coming from somebody who really loves science. I don't want to defy the laws of nature, especially when we already have a lot of people who take one single exception and use it to completely change and flip around the entire definition of nature. I would choose a high number of intelligence, not only because I don't want to defy all science, but also because I believe that it would make me a much better Christian because logic is entirely connected to God. Logic is transcendence of God's perfect plan towards us.
Right.
So with a high intelligence, not only would I be able to really educate people and debate and win all debates, which hopefully every single one of us wants to do. Okay, let's be honest. Everybody here wants to win all debates. But I also would be able to comprehend God's plan in a way where I would hopefully not shy away from the path.
Absolutely, I like that. And in the spirit, instead of normally I pick a supernatural one, like the ability to control time. But in that, I'd say a photographic memory because I think that's kind of a superpower in itself. A photographic memory would be great. I could just look at an article, say, "Cool, that's awesome," and then utilize it for any debate or any conversation in the future. So I would pick that one. All
Sure.
right, I got two more here for you. Then let's see. What is your favorite Bible verse and why?
Um, Isaiah 41:10.
All
Actually, as
right.
a matter of fact, I have my Bible right here. Let me see if I can get it. Fun fact, Isaiah 41:10 is the verse that I have on my wallpaper on my phone where I look at every day before I do anything
Amen.
regarding politics, debates, or studying, I look at it. And Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand." And this verse, it really hits home to me for many different ways, and most specifically because it shows me that regardless of how many people scream at me, fascist, Nazi, murderer, you are disgusting, you are what's wrong with this country, how many people give me threats, how many people threaten my life every day, I can look up at what the Lord Almighty God told me in his revelation in the Bible and revealed to me that the most powerful being in the universe, the one who created it all, the one who transcends all of nature and logic and truth, says that he is with me and he will uphold me in his victorious right hand. So victory is certain, for God is with me.
Amen. That beautiful, beautiful Bible verse. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. And what a great one. And that is probably the best way to start your morning. Pick up your
Amen.
phone, you look at that Bible verse, and you're just reminded of God's love and what He is doing for you. I do want to add mine here and what I've said,
Go for
and
it.
it used to be my true favorite Bible verse is Psalm 118:24, I want to say. And that is, "This is the day the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it." But something came across my heart yesterday and it changed my perspective. And instead of an actual Bible verse, it is two words, and it's "but God." That simple two-word little phrase appears 45 different times in the Bible, 43 depending on which Bible you have. But it is so powerful because every single time you hear "but God," something amazing is always going to follow after that. So that's what I
I
would
like
say on
that.
that note. I do have one more question for you. And I
Go
feel
for it.
like I already know the answer, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it anyways. What is your favorite NFL team? Because you've brought up Super Bowls many times today.
Eagles, Eagles.
I knew
I
it.
am a huge
Oh,
Eagles fan.
I could
Yeah,
tell because
59 and 52.
Yep, I could tell you brought both of those Super Bowls up, so I'm like, well, what do they have in comparison? Oh, that's right, the Eagles played in both. Okay, yep, that's it. So awesome, man. Well, hey, brother, I tell you what, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time and contributing
My
to the
pleasure.
Martin Memo.
My pleasure. I love appearing here. I love the opportunity, and I hope we can have more conversations like this in the future. Your podcast is great, and I would love to do anything in my power to help you out. May we keep spreading the way, the truth, and the life the way we're doing right now.
Amen, brother. I appreciate that, and thank you so much. You're welcome on the podcast anytime. So, well, with that being said, well, folks, that is all we have in store for today. Be sure to join us on Friday as we go over another surprise topic. Be sure to share your thoughts on X. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Martin Memo, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Now, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo.